de aprendizaje, pero tengo una base tecnológica que me ayuda a llegarle a ellas tal cual como lo necesitan, el contenido que necesitamos que aprendan.
Claro.
Y ahí se vuelve también la inteligencia artificial muy habilitadora, porque nuestra educación antes se basaba mucho en la memoria o en pues aprender ciertos procesamientos de
Reglas.
información, reglas, exacto, muy básicas, y cada vez nuestra educación debería migrar más a cómo hago uso de estas herramientas, cómo puedo hacer el mejor uso y qué necesito también, porque aquí ya podemos también decir pensamiento crítico se hace esencial, porque vamos a tener unos temas también de riesgos con la inteligencia artificial que están relacionados con manipulación, desinformación, bueno, y otras cosas que ya hemos empezado a ver.
Me haces acordar de una gráfica que vi hace poquito con fama, con el CESDE tiene un diplomado en ciencias del comportamiento. Muchas personas del laboratorio que trabajamos juntos, del laboratorio de hábitos y ciencias del comportamiento, también somos profesores allí. Y una de las materias iniciales se llama conceptos básicos. Entonces, dentro de conceptos básicos mostramos como el panorama global en que estamos: calentamiento global, migraciones, cambio climático, tal. Y hay una gráfica que yo muestro en esa discusión y es los graduados, es decir, en qué se está graduando la gente en el planeta. Y entonces empieza a haber una curva muy ascendente de ciencia computacional, em, programación, ingeniería computacional, todo lo relacionado, digamos, inteligencia artificial, todo esto se empieza a disparar, pero empieza a haber un declive de las humanidades. Entonces, cada vez menos filósofos, cada vez menos artistas, cada vez menos, no sé, politólogos, comunicadores, pensadores, gente que se esté preguntando por la ética. Entonces, para 2024, es decir, mañana, las ciencias computacionales y todo lo relacionado con ciencias básicas también, física, química, medicina y demás, van a sobrepasar las humanidades. ¿Qué significa eso para un planeta, creo yo, que necesita gente que le haga las preguntas difíciles a esto? ¿Cómo resolvemos ese dilema ético?
Esa es una pregunta compleja, no desde la mirada de Arcángel, sino desde cualquier arista que tú veas desde la AI, porque siento que la inteligencia artificial va un paso a una velocidad mucho más rápida de lo que se puede éticamente cuestionar. Uno se
Ok,
cuestiona cuando algo está mal,
sí,
no cuando antes. Normalmente sucede eso. Entonces, o los que lo hacen al revés no son tantos a la escalabilidad que va esto. Entonces se
claro.
volvió un tema complejo. Desde Arcángel en temas de prevención, yendo a la pregunta que me
Sí,
haces, nosotros la razón por la que existimos y por la que iniciamos esto es porque entendimos que el sistema de salud tiene tres retos principales. El primero es que la mitad de la población mundial no accede a salud. Eso es uno,
a
acceso.
mitad.
La mitad de la población mundial me parece la cosa más injusta y ridícula del mundo que esto suceda. Pero la mitad de la población mundial no accede a
Grave.
salud. Que en Colombia tenemos un sistema de salud muy bueno, realmente.
¿Cuántas?
Buenos días a todos. Bienvenidos a este segundo día del Encuentro Nacional de Ciencias del Comportamiento. A quienes se conectan de manera virtual y quienes nos acompañan en el auditorio, esperamos que hayan recargado sus mentes y estén preparados para todas las propuestas que nos traen nuestros invitados del día de hoy para navegar el cambio.
Ale, qué alegría. Sonido por aquí, por favor. Ale, qué alegría estar contigo. Eh, Qué alegría, Ale, poder estar de nuevo contigo y con toda esta comunidad de entusiastas de las ciencias del comportamiento que hoy nos continúan acompañando en esta segunda jornada y que también se están conectando a nuestra transmisión en streaming a través de YouTube. Los invitamos a que inviten a todos esos otros entusiastas de las ciencias del comportamiento a través de sus redes sociales para que se sumen a esta gran conversación. Hoy vamos a profundizar acerca de los famosos, populares y divertidos nudge o empujones, como les decimos por aquí. Más allá de lo que hemos leído, de esa gran pesca milagrosa que hemos encontrado en esos bestsellers que seguramente a todos los que están aquí nos han inspirado y por supuesto nosotros, nos interesan algunas preguntas prácticas. ¿Cuáles funcionan y para qué casos? ¿Cuál es su impacto a mediano y largo plazo? ¿Son sostenibles? ¿Cómo saber la elección indicada alrededor de un nudge para esos desafíos concretos que tenemos en las organizaciones ALE, por supuesto, pero también cada uno de nosotros en nuestra propia vida?
Totalos. Y además tendremos a nuestro aliado académico vivo, que nos va a contar cómo están aplicando las herramientas comportamentales en América Latina y además haremos zoom a las estrategias que Colombia está fortaleciendo y promoviendo para mejorar la salud financiera de millones de personas.
Ale, y nos pasa por la piel la sostenibilidad y promovemos el florecimiento humano. Por eso los invitamos a todos ustedes a que escaneen el QR que va a aparecer a continuación en pantalla para que registren sus comportamientos proambientales el día de hoy. Juntos podemos lograr esa meta de reducir al máximo nuestra huella de carbono. Hoy al mediodía, Ale, nos vamos a dar cuenta de ese impacto que hemos generado en el planeta. Y queremos que este aprendizaje se extrapole a su día a día. ¿Cuáles son esas acciones diminutas, esos pequeños gestos que suman cuando los multiplicamos?
Total, queremos también contarles a todos, mientras van escaneando el código y contándonos esas decisiones que tomaron el día de hoy en pro del medio ambiente, que la primera conversación que tendremos, nuestra primera invitada es Linnea Gandhi. Así que a quienes ya tienen sus equipos de traducción simultánea, maravilloso, y quienes no, a la entrada del auditorio podrán solicitar los suyos.
Ale, ¿y tú ya hiciste la tarea?
Fue lo primero que hice cuando llegué.
Buenísimo.
Me demoré 10 segundos, ahí dejé cada una de las decisiones que tomé en pro del medio ambiente porque juntos podemos reducir la huella de carbono que genera este evento.
Buenísimo. ¿Y qué tal si eso lo llevamos a la vida cotidiana y no es solamente un autorreporte? Y meditamos una vez a la semana cuáles son esos pequeños actos que podemos realizar para promover el cambio. Les recordamos el uso del hashtag Ciencias del Comportamiento para compartir todos esos aprendizajes, esas conexiones, esas fotografías, esas selfies con los amigos y los compañeros en esta gran causa de las ciencias del comportamiento. Con Linnea Gandhi, profesora, investigadora y líder de Nudge Cartography, una cartografía alrededor de este mecanismo de las ciencias del comportamiento para fortalecer los cambios que ayudará a los gobiernos, a las empresas, a las universidades y por supuesto a cada uno de nosotros como personas a transformar hábitos. Venimos conversando desde hace unos meses. Nos interesaba aplicar las ciencias del comportamiento a nuestro propio evento, pasar por la piel todo eso que de alguna manera predicamos y con lo que acompañamos al mundo. Por eso Linnea nos va a contar una pequeña sorpresa, un experimento de esos que suceden a cada rato, ¿vale? Estamos inmersos en un montón de experimentos y ella nos va a contar a continuación.
Total, con ustedes y sin más espera, Linnea Gandhi.
Hola. Hola, buenos días todos. I'm sorry, I'm going to speak in English. Like Michael, I've got okay Spanish, but it's definitely not good enough to do this talk.
De hecho, vivo en Boston, Massachusetts, aunque trabajo en Pensilvania y nunca he llegado, primera vez que estaba en Medellín, nunca había estado en Colombia, nunca en América del Sur. Así que es un honor estar aquí con usted.
talking about such important topics like behavioral science to improve health, wellness, sustainability, and just general human flourishing. So thank you so much for the invitation. Yes, thank you. I am welcome. Thank you. So as I mentioned in my bio, right now I am a researcher, a teacher, and I'm actually also a student of behavioral science still. I'm still finishing my PhD at Wharton. So I am squarely in the world of academia. But for about 10 years or more before coming to academia, I was like many of you. I was in practice. I was a practitioner, primarily working in consulting in behavioral science, helping companies like startups all the way through Fortune 100 companies apply these insights to help their customers and their employees to make better decisions. And there was one question I got over and over and over again on my projects, and it was, which nudge works best? Which nudge works best? Every client wanted to know, on my project, for my behavior, for my context, what intervention should I use? What idea from behavioral science should I use? What nudge should I use? And this was a really hard question to answer. And just to kick us off, I'm actually curious, since many of you work in practice as well, when you have this question on your projects, whether it be for yourself in your own work or for that of a client, how do you go about answering it? How do you figure out which nudge works best? I do want to actually hear from you. Any ways that you go about trying to figure this out? Danielle? Oh, literature review. I swear I didn't plant you. Now, what's a literature review? Okay, so for those of you who might not be able to hear him in the front, Danielle is saying, he looks at the evidence base to try to figure out, what the evidence says and what we know. Any other strategies that you use to figure out what nudge works best? A systematic review? What's a systematic review? Y es de académicos. So I don't know your name, sorry. Oswald, what he is saying is a systematic review. It's also something from the literature where an academic goes and tries to bring a lot of studies together and code them up across a few different variables. Is it just the literature that you turn to? I've got the hot seats in the front. Yes, sir.
Behavioral diagnosis.
What's a behavioral diagnosis? So behavioral diagnosis, going through to the primary environment where decisions are being made, and what are the barriers, what are the triggers, and then that gives you some hypotheses that you might want to test.
What about to understand the economical context of relation in which you want to apply the
Yeah, so you might look at the socioeconomic context of the people involved, which might happen in the behavioral or decision diagnosis. So I'll show you some ideas that come up in other audiences when I ask this of master's students at the University of Pennsylvania, different consultants and practitioners generally in the US, where I've given versions of this talk before. Here are some of the ideas that they came up with. So one of them is to ask experts. None of you mentioned asking experts. Why wouldn't you ask Gonzalo, right? He's sitting right here. We have experts at our fingertips who can help us figure out which nudge works best. So some of them in this event today, Sergio from Banco Colombia, Juanes from Confamo, Gonzalo from Vivo, they all do this for a living. So if we want to know which nudge works best, we could just call them up, right? That's one solution. Another one that people often mention, they clearly don't mention it, I'll talk to it, is forecasting from a crowd. So instead of just asking our experts, we could poll all of you and take the crowd wisdom and figure out from all of you and your opinions which nudge works best. That's something that other people do. We also might run an experiment, right? If you want to know which nudge works best, you should use the gold standard tool that we have at our fingertips, right? An A/B test where we're trying a nudge against each other. And then the final thing, which actually all of you mentioned, sorry if I'm not using the clicker right, is the literature. Right? We can go into the literature, into the scientific database that's out there of all of the publications from academics, all the publications from the behavioral insights team, even from your own organizations. If you've been able to run experiments in the past, we could look at those and figure out what works best from that. But each one of these sources is, unfortunately, a little bit flawed. The first one, our experts, as smart as they are still human. And so I'm going to bet you if I gave them each a problem and asked which nudge works best, they're going to give me different answers. Right? They're going to disagree. And which expert is better than the rest? I'll leave that for you to decide. But they're human, right? Also, if I were to go to Gonzalo on Monday and ask him which nudge works best, and ask him maybe on Friday which nudge works best, he might actually give a different answer based on something that he read recently, someone he spoke with, an experience he had. And this is not because our experts aren't expert, it's because they're human. So they're a little bit unreliable. We have similar problems when we use the wisdom of the crowd. All of these people are human as well. And a few studies that have come out recently looking at whether crowds can forecast which nudge works best have had really mixed results. Sometimes they're really good, sometimes they're really bad, and we have no idea as to when or why. Experiments are the gold standard. So as a process, they're not really flawed. But the problem, as we saw yesterday, is you can't always run an experiment. Right? You don't always have the regulatory ability, the technical ability, the operational ability. You may not have a big enough sample size. And even if you can run an experiment, you still have to decide which nudges to put in the experiment to begin with. Right? There are hundreds and hundreds of ideas you could use. You've got to pare those down. So you're still asking the question, which nudge or nudges work best? And then finally, and the focus of today, and the ideas that my friends here in the front row mentioned, the literature. The literature is not a perfect resource for all of us. And neither is this clicker. Sorry if I'm doing it wrong. It's probably human error. But the flaw is, and see, maybe I'm doing it wrong. Yeah, I've been using that one. I see. Oh, it's not me. Yes. 1 minute? Okay, well, I'll talk to it. You don't need the images. So what's wrong with the literature today? The literature is really hard to navigate. There are many and many papers out there, many studies that you could read, and trying to fit all of that information together is incredibly difficult. You face 4 challenges in doing so, 2 of which might be on the screen already. The first one is navigability. Right? We have all of these different papers out there. Which of these should we read for our context? We can't sit all day trying to consume all this literature. We have to pick and choose. But even if I knew which papers to read for my context, I have a second problem, and that's generalizability. Maybe I am doing a study or I'm doing a problem in Colombia, but all of that literature I'm reading, it's mostly run in the United States. How am I to be guaranteed that a nudge that works in this context in the United States is going to work in Colombia? I can't know. It's really hard. And this is a problem that is a very salient discussion in academia right now, and we don't have a good answer. But even if I knew what generalized, if I knew that, oh, it depended on this country feature or this type of person, even if I knew that, I have a third problem, and that's the idea of transparency, meaning not all papers are documenting all of those different features. So one of the important features for generalizability might be the age of the participants involved in the study, right? Are they young? Are they old? Are they middle-aged? And yet not all papers actually report this, right? In fact, a lot of the papers that we've been reading on this project don't even have average age or the standard deviation of the age. And so you have a transparency issue. And then the final issue that we have is one called commensurability. So even if I knew what studies to read, even if I knew what features mattered for generalizability, even if all of those were documented across all papers, I have an issue of commensurability in that different papers use the same word to mean different things, or different words to mean the same things, or they use their own frameworks for categorizing and labeling what a nudge is. That's the issue of not having commensurability in the literature, and it's incredibly hard for an academic to navigate, and even more so for someone in practice to navigate. And on the next slide, I want to show you a very simple example of commensurability, presuming we can click ahead. Let's see. Awesome. Okay, so commensurability or comparability. What I'm going to show you here is an example with a very simple concept called domain. Any study that you read has a domain. Maybe it's about the environment. Maybe it's about health. Maybe it's about sustainability. Right? These are the different topics and domains that your study might be dealing with. What you'll see on this slide here at the bottom are 5 different author names. These are systematic reviews or meta-analyses that look at subsets of the behavioral science literature, and for every experiment in that set, they have a domain named. But they use different frameworks and different domains. And so what I'm going to do to show you the differences and the issues of commensurability is to take 134 new experiments that have to do with nudging that are from our database, and I'm going to code them across each one of these so you can see the difference. So let's start with Mertens et al. This here is a visual distribution of the experiments, the 134 experiments, coded against the domain names in Mertens et al. And if you look at it, they're mostly about finance and pro-social topics. Okay, that's sensible, that makes sense. Now let's look at it across the other frameworks, coding the exact same experiments. It's a mess. You look at that and you go, oh my God, we are talking past each other. And this is not a critique of those underlying studies or systematic reviews. They're fantastic resources for us. The point is, for a lot of us out here, and myself included, who want to consume all this literature, the fact that people are using different labels to mean the same thing, or the same labels to mean different things, makes it really hard for us to navigate. And just to show you another example, remember we saw that a lot of the studies were in finance and pro-social in Mertens. And if we look at Hummel over here, look how many are in finances. It's the same word. Finances, finance. Why are we seeing such a different distribution? Well, if you go under the hood and you go into the details, you start to see that Mertens et al. Takes charitable giving studies, donating money, and puts it under pro-social, whereas in the Hummel paper, they put all of that under finance. But you shouldn't be expected to figure that out, right? You guys have jobs to do. You shouldn't have to read papers in all of their entirety, all of their footnotes, go into the underlying databases to figure out what's going on. And so at the end of the day, this is what makes the literature so hard to put together to answer a simple question for your context of which nudge is going to work. You can't navigate it. You can't figure out what generalizes, it's not always transparent, and we have this commensurability issue to boot. What I think we need to solve all of this is a map. We have maps all the time, right? I used a map to get here today. Maps are pervasive, and it's because we have a lot of great data in this day and age to use for navigating our geographical world. So just as an example, getting from the hotel to here to the museum, I use Google Maps. But I could use Google Maps in many ways. I could ask it to give me the route by walking, by biking, by taking a car. I could ask it for the most scenic route or the route that is wheelchair accessible. I could get the fastest route, the cheapest route, the route that uses the least CO2. Right? I can use the database underlying Google Maps to answer the question for my context, for my parameters. I want us to be able to do that for the literature, for the space of knowledge that we have about nudges. So I want us to be able to get from behavior today to better behavior tomorrow by navigating across the scientific literature and sorting on the parameters for our context. So I want to know what works based on me being in Colombia, what works based on me generally doing this nudge to adults, what works based on me being constrained to only using a letter versus using SMS or another channel of intervention. This is the aspiration. It's effectively trying to build the Google Maps of the epistemic or knowledge space of the literature. But I got a problem. I don't have billions of dollars of ad revenue, sorry to say. I'm not Google, I don't have all those resources. None of us in academia do. So we've got to start with much more humble origins. And I take inspiration from a guy named Fra Mauro, who was an Italian monk and cartographer in the 1450s. This guy, Fra Mauro, built one of the most famous mappamundis, map of the world. And you're seeing an image of it right here. It's one of the most famous because for its time, it was incredibly comprehensive, incredibly detailed, and quite accurate, again, for its time. And how did he go about doing this? Well, he spent years, many, many years, pulling together all the different evidence about the geographical space he lived in and weaving it all together into a single map. He looked at different maps that other cartographers had made from different regions of the world, comparing them, contrasting them, weaving them together. He read journals and diaries of travelers like Marco Polo to try to fill in some of the details. And ostensibly, he even went down to the local bar and talked to travelers when they passed through to get more details and figure out what he might be missing in his map. And this was the result. Again, the most accurate comprehensive map of the world at this time in the 1450s. But let's be honest, it's a really bad map. It's like you would not want to use it today. And just to give you some examples, we've got some monsters in there, which is cute. To his credit, he did write little annotations being like, I am skeptical of this, in the margin, which is pretty cool. He had to include some religious elements based on the time. So this is the Garden of Eden. Again, to his credit, it's outside the geographical world. It's more in the celestial world. And personally to you guys, there is no Colombia on this map. There's not even South America. According to him, it doesn't exist. So this is a really bad map, but it's a start. You cannot get Google Maps today without these sort of mapamundis centuries ago. And this is where we are today with the literature. It's disappointing to say, but this is where we are, and this is where we have to start if we want to eventually build the Google Maps of the literature, of the nudge literature tomorrow. And how our lab is doing it is through a process that we call research cartography, or basically a process for how to map what we know. And it takes a lot of its inspiration from the world of geographical cartography. So we start by saying, well, what is the space that we care about? Fra Mauro cared about the entire world as they knew it at the time. We care about which nudge works, under which conditions, for whom, when. Basically the same problem you care about. The second step is to define dimensions. So in the geographical space, that's going to be coordinates, north, south, east, west, or longitude and latitude. For us, it's going to be all those dimensions that we think are important for generalizability. The country that the study was run in, any demographic information we have about the people involved, the channel of the intervention, what nudges and concepts are being used in the intervention, what type of behavior is happening, is it hard to do, does it require financial investment? All of those features, and there are over 400 of them that we're coding, are important to us in dimensionalizing this map. And then finally, we start filling it up with data. And so for us, we've been starting in 2018 and going forward with any published randomized control test done by academics or by practitioners. So I've been working with partners like the Behavioral Insights team, B-Way, to bring in more and more evidence that's representative of what we know today about nudging. And then finally, and I will say we're not quite there yet, we're going to be iterating and improving on this. So I'll show you a little bit of the results of this map today, and our next step is to make it better and better so that eventually we move from the world of Fra Mauro, a pretty bad map, to one that's better and better, like Google Maps that you're used to for navigating the geographical space. So the process for doing this, I'll just give you a little bit of a glimpse under the hood into the factory of how we make this map today, just so you can see all the work involved. The first step is one that's familiar if you've done any sort of literature review of your own. It's to ingest all of the experiments that we can find. And so we bring them in from academic search engines, from our practitioner partners, and then we prioritize them. It's really important to us that we only include somewhat higher level standard experiments in the database. So they have to be on a real behavior, they can't be hypothetical, they have to have at least 100 units per cell, meaning have a large enough sample size to start to see some significance, we hope. And we have some other inclusion criteria we look at in terms of internal validity, do we think there are any confounds, and if there are glaring confounds, we don't include it in the map. And then we go through the process of coding. So I have a team of master's students who work for me. They are all masters in behavioral science. They're fantastic. And for every experiment, 2 of them independently code it, and then they come together for consensus. Then they audit it with me. We use a little bit of ChatGPT and LLMs to try to automate more of the process. And then we review it with authors and ask them questions about what might be missing. Then finally, we have our early set of data, our early database, which is the underlying data behind what we hope will be a map. We also have another set of processes that I'll call out because they're really hard, and this is coding the interventions. Trying to code nudges across 50 or more concepts of what a nudge is extremely hard. It's much harder than that domain issue I showed you, where people are using different languages to talk about domains. Think about how hard that is going across 6 different frameworks to talk about nudges. And so I have a special team dedicated to just doing that outside of the main coding process, and they come to consensus as well. And then we get to the fun part, which is modeling. We can now use this database to start building that map using different types of models to describe what we know and to start predicting what's going to happen in a new experiment. So we can run new field experiments, predict the outcomes, and then no matter how well we do in predicting, we put that data right back into the map to make it better and better over time. This is the type of work that goes behind the scenes to building a database, a map, that we hope can be closer and closer to what Google Maps is for geography eventually. Right now, we spent over 1.5 years doing it. The first year was mostly focused on building this infrastructure and coding the first 100 studies. We've now coded 136 experiments. There's actually 20 more, but I'm behind on my auditing, so they're not going to be shown today. And we have over 400 dimensions. So, the million-dollar question, the one that I'm hoping to spend the rest of today on with you today, is like, how good is our map? Or rather, how good is a model on top of the data that we're building in this map? We're going to run a model on the database that we've coded already and try to make a prediction out of sample to see how well it can do. And so to do this, it'd be great to have a new field experiment to make a prediction on, right? Well, as you might have guessed from our introduction, we have a new field experiment, and you all were part of it. So several weeks ago, if you got an email from Confama advertising this conference, you, unbeknownst to you, were part of our experiment. There were many different versions of those emails that went out, and we've now analyzed the data to see, did any version have any differences in terms of who clicked the link inside the email to register, who actually registered for this event, and who came to the event. So thank you for participating in the experiment. It was IRB approved. So if you have any complaints, let me know. So we are now going to spend time looking at the results about clicking the link to register, actually registering, and attending. And so to show you those emails and what you may or may not have gotten, on the left-hand side here, I'll move out of the way, was the control email. This is what the team would have sent had we not decided to run an experiment. So it's very similar to the one from last year. This was the first nudge-ified, or one where we added some nudge features to it. So nudge A, here you'll see the main difference is we moved the button up, and we added little arrows to try to draw your attention, like, register, don't forget. Because if you bury that button at the bottom of an email, maybe people don't notice it, and they don't remember to register. The second treatment email or nudge email is this one. The main difference here is we didn't try to draw attention as much to it, except to say, you should reserve your seat before the 1st of October, space fills fast. Right? So kind of an idea of scarcity. Very honestly, space filled really fast this year. They filled really fast last year, but trying to make sure you guys don't delay if you want to come, register now. And then our final one, and I'll move out of the way again, treatment C. This one focused just on the top of the email and changed the message there to use something like social proof. Not just talking about the focus of sustainability, but saying, you know, over 300 people came last year, come this year, join them, right? This is what everybody else is doing who's enthusiastic about behavioral science. So these were the 4 emails that were sent out. In this talk today, I'm going to focus on A, B, and C, those 3 treatment emails, just for time. And now we're going to go and figure out how well a model of our data, or model of the map, can actually predict how well these, which results work best, or which nudge works best. But again, even before showing you that, I have one more thing to say, which is, you know, how do we know if a model is good or not? Is it compared to random chance? Is it compared to what you might do, right? We need a baseline, a benchmark to compare to. And so I'm going to show you forecasts from lay people who predicted which would work, forecasts from my students at the University of Pennsylvania who are Masters of Behavioral Science, and you all. You all are going to do us the favor of participating today and seeing if you can guess which nudge worked best. And to do that, we'll use a software called Poll Everywhere that you can use on your phones. And so we're going to do that right now. Does everybody have a phone? I'm sure you all have phones. This is a reminder of what the emails are. I'll show little snippets of them on all of the pages so you have them for reference. I'm just showing you here now. Remember the first one, A, this is more about bringing things top of mind. Hey, this is the button, see the button. B is much more about space fills up fast. Please sign up if you really want to come. And the one at the top here is more around social proof. A lot of other people came last year. You should join them this year. Those are the main differences across these treatment emails. All right. And then, okay, so on this screen, there are 3 different ways to participate. I think the easiest is a QR code. You can also text to 222333 that word, and then you'll be inside the survey, or you can go online. And these will also be available on the next few slides if you haven't been able to get the link. It's going to bring you to a website called PollEv, or Poll Everywhere, which will change the question based on the slide we're on. Generally, is it loading for people? Yeah? Got positive? All right. So, our first question. Which of these nudges, A, B, or C, led to the most click-throughs? All you have to do, oh, you're already voting. Look at that. You just have to hit one. That's it. And we've got 34, 35. Whoa, look at that. That's a scientist's dream. Look at those numbers. Give me the data. Oh, my God. Oh, it must be people online, because I was like, I don't think there are 70 people in front of me. I'm just waiting for it to slow down. The next question, when I click the button, the next question will pop up on your screen so that you can answer it. Oh, do I wait for 100? Yes, we got 100. Okay, I feel like that's good enough. Oh, no, okay. Who did that? All right, I'm going to go to the next screen just because I want to make sure we get through the talk and we can answer questions. So you can keep on voting at home. Here is the second one. So same question, which nudge do you think worked best on registrations? It could be a different one, right? Maybe you think a different one helped registrations versus click-through. We have A, B, and C. Just waiting to see if we get to that magic 100 again. Yes, okay. No! All right, our final question, same idea except for attendance. Which of these do you think is going to work best to get people to actually show up? And notably, we captured this data yesterday, so people who showed up physically in person yesterday. A, B, C. All right. Almost done. I actually have one more question. I know. I'm in academia now, so I just want data. So we're also going to ask you, who do you think was most accurate? We're going to show you the forecasts of yourselves, the people who are lay people on Prolific, everyday people answering these questions, Penn Master's students, and that'll be the symbol for the model. Which of these do you think works best? And this is our final question in the survey. Do you think you'll be most accurate? And this is just course ranking, right? You're not predicting effect size, just the course ranking. And it's going to be across all 3 predictions. This will see how much faith you have in me or yourselves. I should have put our experts on here, right? I should have singled Gonzalo and Sergio and Juanes out, but it's okay. I won't put you in the hot seat. Chasing that 100. Hey, okay, great. All right, thank you for participating in that. I really appreciate it. Helps us to figure out what are people's intuitions even to begin with before we dive into showing you the results. And now I go into like hardcore academic mode to give you all the caveats about what I'm about to share. First of all, we're using a very coarse measure right now to look at these email nudges against each other. We're not looking at effect size. We could. We're not right now because it's too hard in this large environment. We're not even looking at statistical significance. I'm just looking at, if we look at the percentage of people who came to the event, who clicked through all of that, and just ranking the treatments by those raw numbers, that's all we're looking at right now. And then also, these are very preliminary. The model that we run using the data right now is a random forest. It's got 100,000 trees in it, so we've run it quite a bit. But there are a lot of judgments that I could have made in terms of what parameters to include, what parameters to prioritize, which studies to include. So just take it with a huge grain of salt that these are preliminary results. And now, with that caveat aside, we can show you the data. All right, which nudge works best? We're going to start with clicking the email link, the click-through, that first button. You got the email. Who actually clicked the link? And here are our data. And I'm going to move out of the way because we need the full screen to see this. Am I blocking you guys? Good? All right. Okay, so I'm going to just rank them, course ranking. Reality is what happened from the worst nudge to the best nudge. Not looking at effect size, not looking at statistical significance, just raw proportions. Our worst one was the social proof. This one did not do as well. The second one was this button salience. And the third one, the one that did the best, was scarcity. Oh, you can't do that. Your data's anonymous. Don't believe him. He could be lying, right? Okay, so this was the ranking, again, raw scores. Let's see what lay people say. Not a single ordering correct. Again, these are lay people, right? We shouldn't expect everyday people to make this guess. I did, by the way, provide them with English translations of the emails. How about my Penn master's students? These guys are spending 1.5 to 2 years studying behavioral science. How do they do at Penn? Great. Okay, are you ready? Are you ready for this database I have spent 18 months of my life crying over and building, and then the model that I reran yesterday with 100 for loops. It took an hour to run. Are you ready? Okay? Drum roll. Right? I mean, I'm just going to go now, right? Because it's, but I mean, hey, maybe we're good. Maybe the model's just imitating our brains. I don't know. Okay, so this is the first dependent variable. Maybe we can rescue ourselves on the next two. Oh, we should also see what you guys guessed. Let's see if you beat all of us, right? So we want B, A, C. We want the scarcity one, then the salience, then the social proof. Let's see what you said. Scarcity, all right. And then your salience and social proof were slightly flipped. But okay, can we just say, you beat all of us? I think that deserves a clap. Well done. Very nice. Look at that. Well, this is a humbling experience. Okay, next one. We're going to do registration. So not just clicking the link, but who went in and registered. Our reality will be on the side here. Worst to best. Worst was the salience one. The second worst was social proof. And then our best one was, again, scarcity. So slightly different order on the bottom, but scarcity worked best again. You ready to see how people forecast? All right, here's our lay people. Okay, they got the middle one. Mm-hmm. Awesome. These are my Penn students again. Are we ready for the model? Yeah! Okay, well, we got this. All right, so that, again, humbling. It's not perfect, but it is imitating human minds, so that's interesting to see. How about you guys? Did you guys put scarcity first again, and then let's say social proof? Okay, so let this be a lesson to me. I'm only going to do forecasts from the population on which we're running the experiment. I think that's a cool, interesting lesson here. Okay, final one. Here we go. Attendance. This is the most important one, right? We should really just wait this one, because those were just, who cares about those dependent variables? We care about attendance. Okay, let's see if this can resurrect our model. From worst to best. The worst one, again, salience. The second worst was scarcity. Well, let's see how you guys do. You love your scarcity. And the best was social proof. Okay, lay people. Here we go. What do lay people think? 3 for 3, right? Striking out. Our Penn students, they did. They got that best one. Okay. I guess they get to graduate. And then our model. And here we go. So our students picked which one worked best. our model at least picked one which worked worst, right? Which, you could make an argument why that's useful, but not very good, and not very good across the board, again, in terms of predictions, right? No one got them all lined up on any of these dependent variables, except maybe you guys. So let's see what happens on the next slide. Did you guys put social proof first? Oh my gosh, I was not expecting this. This is amazing. Wow. Oh, wow, you deserve a round of applause. This is amazing. I don't think I've ever seen anything like this. This was all you guys, right? Our experts? No. Okay, you are the model. I think I'm just going to give up on my project and model you guys. So well done. You guys have really good intuitions about which of these are going to work on you, which I guess kind of makes sense. If we go back to figuring out which nudge works best, well, one of you just suggested behavioral diagnosis. If we go in the field and we talk to people, the people whose behavior we actually want to change, well, maybe we're going to do a better job at figuring out what works best. All right, one more poll, though. Remember, we asked you who you thought did best. So let me just show you the overall, remind you. These are the emails that did best in different dependent variables. I will note, sadly, none of these were statistically different from each other. So could be random chance. But if we're in practice, we need to figure out what works best or what has the best chance at going forward. We're going to at least use this pilot data to move forward with. And then in terms of prediction, well, you guys beat all of us, so well done. Did you have the intuition, though, that you would beat everybody? Let's see. Oh, well, thank you for your faith in me. Very misplaced, sadly. And many of you had appropriately placed your faith in yourselves. Okay, so bringing this all together, this exciting adventure we were on, I love revealing data I've never seen before. I still think we need a map, right? We need to understand what works and why. I can't afford to always go and poll the people I'm about to nudge. Gosh, I wish that were the case, right? And I can't necessarily rely on crowd forecasts. We saw those didn't go very well. I still believe that if we put all the data in one place and we build better and better models, maybe my model was bad, right? A lot of other data scientists out there could build a better model. I think it's still worth doing to help us better navigate the space of behavioral science studies out there, understand issues with generalizability, make the data more transparent, and make all of this evidence commensurable so that you can use it in your projects. Although I wouldn't recommend using my model yet, but call me in a year, and it's going to get better. But the most important lesson here is it's not about accuracy. Yes, accuracy is important, obviously, right? That's how business works. I can't give you a bad nudge and have your project backfire. When it comes to producing data like this and maps like this, it's not necessarily about accuracy to begin with. It's about these other attributes. It's about reproducibility, auditability, improvability. If I went and asked you guys why you voted the way you did, you're going to come up with a variety of answers. They may not actually reflect your mental model. People are complicated. The reason you chose one nudge over another may not be the reason you think you chose it for. I can't unpack and dissect what's in your head. I can do it with the model. And that's the power with putting all of the evidence we have together in one database and starting to model over it, is I can open it up. I can reproduce the exact results I gave today. There's no reliability issues like with our experts. And I can start to see what isn't working and why, and how can I fix it and improve it over time. And just to give you a hint of how we can do that, I'll show you one way you can even start to audit the model that I built today. So I built a random forest model, which you may or may not be familiar with, but one of the plots that can come out of a forest model is something called an importance plot. So it takes all the parameters that were in the model, all those variables about the experiments, and it's going to take them one by one and shuffle their values at random. And the worse prediction gets in a trained test mode, that means the more important that variable is for promoting accuracy. And so this importance plot is going to show you across the 100,000 loops I ran over this model, which 10 parameters consistently came up to say that these were important in the model working well. And so I'll show you, like, the larger bars here mean they're more important. And then I'm also going to show you a rough split in terms of those that positively and negatively correlate with effect size. Now, this is a linear comparison. The random forest model is not necessarily linear, so don't read too much into it, but I think it gives us some intuition about what's going on under the hood in the model so we can try to critique it and improve it over time. And so here are the ones that are positively correlated with effect size. How large the sample size is at the randomization level, which might be different from the analysis level if it's a cluster design. And then 4 features the behavior. The behavior must be done at a specific location. It requires advanced planning. It has to be done at a specific time, and it requires a financial cost. Does this seem intuitive to you? Behaviors that have these restrictions or attributes correlating higher with effect size and being important for prediction. Does anyone have any idea of what's going on here in the model? Because this is not intuitive to me as a practitioner. I would have thought that these would be negatively correlated with effect size. They're behaviors that no matter what nudge you give me, it's hard to do. I'm not going to be compliant. Well, what's going on here are a couple of things. One of which is that in the studies that are being used in the current model, a lot of them are from the compliance literature. A lot of them about tax compliance, filling out forms, some of which have to be at a specific location. These are studies that it just so happens are easier for academics to run. And what ends up making it into the literature? Studies with positive effect sizes. And so we have a publication bias, a selection bias issue coming in and distorting the predictive ability of our model. And this is why it is incredibly important that we continue to ingest and build evidence from all of you, from our partners at the Behavioral Insights team, our partners at B-Way, any of you running experiments. I want that data to go in this model to make it more representative and more accurate, because if we keep having to deal with underlying data like this, yeah, you'll be able to sort and filter and look at the data in the database and in the model, but the mapping it does is going to be bad. It's going to be really, really bad. And so this is cool, though, because I can actually open up the model and look at this. I can question it. I can look at the studies going into it. I can look at how we're coding the parameters and improve it over time, in contrast to all of the other sources of information and forecasts. I can't do that with all of you humans. So this is why I think this is still a really promising strategy, even though the first model that we built today, because you're the first ones to do it, wasn't that good. All right, so this is where we are today. We have a pretty bad map, but we have a map. And that is step 1 in this whole process. And what'll be really neat, because as we build this map over time, we'll be able to do 2 really important things. The first thing is we can exploit the map. We can exploit the database to make predictions about what we know in the new study. And hopefully those predictions get better and better. But we can also use it to explore what we know. If we go into the underlying database that we've been very laboriously coding over a year and a half, we can start telling you where we don't have much evidence. We don't have, I think we have 1 study from Colombia in the database right now. This is starting to escalate and be able to show academics, practitioners, where do we not have enough evidence? Where do we actually need to go and partner and run more experiments and collect more evidence in order to get more representative knowledge to answer these questions for you about what nudge works best? So I'm really excited, not just about exploitation, which is what we did today with prediction, but exploration, really highlighting and bringing to light where the gaps in the literature are today that we really need to fill. And with that, I'm going to remind you all of the effort that it took just to get to this pretty bad model that we saw today. It took a year and a half of work across all of these steps, and we continue to do it every day. My awesome RAs are coding right now. And just to show you the costs of this, it took us about a year to build the whole thing. And then per RCT, per experiment right now, it takes over 6 hours. So this is a 5-hour process-ish. And then coding just the interventions takes over an hour and a half. And a lot of that has actually gotten paused and stopped and restarted because it has been so hard to figure out how to code different nudges across stimuli in the literature because of the commensurability issue. So just a ton of credit goes to my team, which is a huge team. Today, these are our fall participants. This would not be possible without all of them. It's not something that only I can do. I can recruit these people, but these are the ones doing really all the work behind the scenes to build the infrastructure and code the studies and hopefully get us to a better map over time. And with that, I'm not sure how much time I have left, but I have just one wrap-up slide. Okay, so I want to leave you with a provocative question, whatever you think of the map that we built today, is how can we know what we know about which nudge works best, or anything else for that matter, if we cannot combine different sources of evidence? I don't think we can. Or more succinctly, I'd like to say that prediction requires truly cumulative science. And we do not have that today based on the incentive structure and the publication process that we have. But it's doing a huge disservice to all of you who are using behavioral science downstream for impact to improve health, well-being, human flourishing. And so we really need to fix it. And we're trying to do it, slowly but surely, with the process of research cartography. And I hope I can stand on this stage or another stage in a year or two from now and show you even better results around prediction. But I'm really excited to share this with you today. And I look forward to getting your questions and hopefully collaborating with all of you to make this evidence base even better. So thank you.
Thank you, Linnea. Amazing conference. Llega el momento feliz, el momento de las preguntas, así que invitados a que le hagan todas esos aportes, preguntas, cuestionamientos a Linnea a propósito de la conferencia que acabamos de pasar por la piel. Hay manos por allí levantadas. Por aquí está Lina. Mientras se nos animan arriba.
Thank you, Linnea. I really enjoyed your presentation. You're a great presenter, and thank you for this work. I was wondering if the options you presented, the clicking, the attendance, the register attendance and everything, if they're fully comparable, because to me, you were kind of moving different things at the same time. So, and this goes back to the question of quality, if you are assessing the quality of the studies you are including in your model as well. So if you can talk about a little bit about that. Thank you.
Let me make sure I understand the question, though. Yeah. So in terms of like clicking a button, registering for a conference, and attending a conference, they're very different behaviors, right? Or, the first two are kind of similar, but especially because registration was free. But attendance is very different.
No, I was talking about the options you presented in the email, like the pictures that you presented. To me, they were not fully comparable.
Oh, totally.
Okay.
But that's life, right? If we were doing a pure, perfect academic experiment, and well, I won't try to click back because I'll probably have a problem with the clicker. You know, they would look exactly the same except for the small thing that changed. But we're working with designers, people with different goals, different opinions, and so other things varied as well.
This is the purist in me.
Which is right, but that's life, right? You're going to have operational constraints where you won't always be able to make things perfect. So while I highlighted the main nudge that we wanted to indicate, when my coders went through and coded all the nudge attributes to it, I didn't tell them what we were looking for. In fact, the whole coding that they do in that process to tag it with different nudge mechanisms is blind to the hypothesis of the study. They don't know any keywords that the authors are using, and the same was here. So they actually coded, I was looking in their coding, they actually coded the three treatments equally there's a framework from Dolan et al., the Mind Space Framework, 2012. It's from Behavioral Insights team. There's a concept there called salience. I thought ex ante that they would have only coded the one with the button with the arrows as salient. But actually, they all agreed that all three treatment emails increased the salience of the target action, which is true. And so, you know, when you actually look at this and step back, I think it's important to code the studies without like thinking about the direct hypothesis, because then you can capture those nuances that you're mentioning.
Thank you.
Buenísimo. Que el idioma no sea una barrera para la curiosidad. Recuerden que tenemos dispositivos de traducción y Linnea allí los puede escuchar en español en el caso de que tengan preguntas. Mientras alguien se anima por allá arriba, John, dale.
Thank you, Linnea, for your presentation. Really lovely the experiment. I'm very glad to see, that you showed that we could make this collaboration. I was wondering about the role of artificial intelligence in the modeling. I would like you to explain a little bit more what's the, like the work or the jobs that artificial intelligence do in your model.
Oh, I'm really tempted to go backwards. No, I won't. Okay. No, I won't. So yeah, this is really costly. There's a huge human cost to doing the coding, but that's sort of the cost right now of getting to the gold standard purely accurate coding. What we started this summer with the advent of LLMs being so powerful was we took some of the low-hanging fruit. So there are certain variables that are about just paraphrasing the gist of an experiment. And so we now have that fully automated with a large language model. And then we had actually that concept of domain that I showed you before with the rainbow plot. All of those, we used to have a team of coders coding and coming to agreement. And then one of those people I hired over the summer, he stayed on, and he built an entire prompt system so that now none of us code domain anymore. It's completely done by ChatGPT. But that took a summer to build, and it's not always perfect, right? I go in to sometimes you have to override it sometimes. It's not perfect. And then right now, I was just getting some texts earlier. One of my RAs is really interested in the intersection of behavioral science and LLMs, and so she is taking on the hard task of trying to do it for nudging. So for all the concepts of nudges that we have, which I think are 56 concepts, can we automate it? Or at least can we automate easy, attractive, social, and timely, those broad bucket categories. So we're really trying to integrate it because it's just very costly from a human standpoint, but the accuracy is not perfect right now. And when it comes to like the core coding process, if I want to code results, it's really hard. Well, I should say, it may not be hard anymore as of 2 days ago, but from our testing up until the latest model got released, it was hard for any of these models that are out there to navigate inside a paper, find the experiment we're talking about, because there are multiple experiments in a paper, go into that, look at all the conditions and all the measures and all the results, pick the model that we, for our database, are included. It was a mess, so it couldn't even navigate inside a paper. But maybe as of 2 days ago, with the launch of the new one, this will get better.
Great, thank you.
Fantastic. Por aquí hay otra pregunta. Ah, bueno, ya se súper animaron. ¿Te parece, si quieres por aquí y damos un par por allá? Una mano por aquí y otra por allá.
Linnea, thank you for your presentation. This was amazing. I guess I'm a bit familiar with your work, but this has advanced a lot from what I saw.
It's still bad.
No, come on. But so I guess BIT has collaborated with having frameworks that kind of apply to a lot of things. So I guess that's good. But more from a practitioner side, since I do experiments and many people here do, what can be helpful for your work and the coding, and for what can we be doing better so that this process is easier, not only for you, but for everybody who's trying to check our experiments?
Thank you so much for asking that. I appreciate it. The biggest thing that I wish everyone would do differently when they're documenting the evidence that they've produced in an experiment is just write everything down. Like, why does this take so long to do? It's because we're looking at footnotes, online appendices, the raw data, because maybe summary statistics weren't provided in the paper. I would say the behavioral insights team does a pretty good job, thank God. So you've saved us some time, but there's still heterogeneity in what you write up. And so if anyone is documenting any of your research, write everything down, be clear, share as much as you can about all the variables and parameters that were involved, at least in an appendix, because you never know who's going to want to use it. It may not be me, but it could be all of you. You don't want to be having a lot of people call you up to fill in the details. It's like the author review process with some authors who've actually been very kind and responded quite a bit. It can take 2 months of back and forth because they haven't looked at the data since 2012. Right? And all of you know, if you've run a project 5 years ago, you don't remember the details. So I'm going to take a quote from my favorite professor from Chicago Booth, Professor Linnea Gandhi. If you don't write it down, it doesn't exist. Write it down. And that will make my job a lot easier. But if anyone else is interested in getting involved or talking more, I'm happy to chat about other ways to collaborate, but that would be my #1 wish for the world.
Por aquí.
Hi, thank you very much for the talk. I want to try to do this in English. I don't know if I will be able to do it. My question is about the final user. Who is supposed to be the final user of this map that you are making? And which variables are the final user able to pick? Like here with the example you show us, location will be a very important variable to be able to choose. I don't know if maybe you explain it and I miss it, or how can we like use this? Thank you.
Thank you. Your English is much better than my Spanish, so definitely take heart at that. Yeah, so I kind of have two audiences in mind, and maybe that will be my downfall, but I think this is useful for both people like you and for academics. So people like you, I want you to be able to go in and filter on those parameters. So our goal is to make this fully transparent and user-friendly. So we might not let you filter on every parameter because some of them may be irrelevant, but using user testing, we'll try to figure out what are the most important ones for you to filter on or to set before, let's say, a model runs or just for viewing the literature. From an academic standpoint, I'm hoping this is useful to anybody who wants to run systematic reviews or meta-analyses. If they want to do it in the nudge literature, they can just use the data that we've already built, and if they want another variable added, I mean, I have trained coders, we could go in and do that for them. Anyone who's done a meta-analysis or systematic review knows this is painful and does not want to do it. So the idea is partly to build a machinery up so we can actually systematize, at least in the experiment space with behavioral science, systematize how we're bringing all the data together.
Super. Tenemos una última pregunta por allí.
Aquí estoy. Yeah, I just want to echo my thanks. That was an excellent presentation. I really like the interactive element. So I guess two quick questions. One, it still feels like if you have an estimate based on these kind of the metadata of the intervention, obviously intervention quality still matters, the copy still matters. If it's a self-reported outcome, how you write the question still matters. Are you trying to consider kind of quality of measurement and intervention development in this? And then the second one is, do you, in order to continue populating this and have truly cumulative science, are you trying to create kind of like a standard template for reporting in this field that practitioners, academics can follow, at least in some sort of, you know, in some sort of, in populating the database?
Let me make sure I understand the first question first. It's that in these original sources, whether they be academic or practitioner, the way that the measurement happens for that behavioral variable might be noisy, it might be an imperfect measurement. Is that right?
I think both the measure and the intervention, right? If you want to have talk about scarcity, but how you relate that information obviously matters as well.
Yeah. So on the measurement side of things, if in the reporting of the paper, and people don't always talk about this, but if in the reporting there seems to be a bunch of measurement issues, we don't include it. And we just take some notes about that. But to some extent, that's penalizing people who aren't transparent. As if I have a bad study, I might not write about how bad the measurement is. For some variables, we do include whether it's self-reported or not. So we include self-reported measures, but that is a parameter that we code. So you could, yes, actually in the model and in the other slide, it actually showed up as negatively correlated with effect size. I have no explanation as to why at this point. On the intervention side, yeah, there's a ton of heterogeneity. If I want to do social proof, do I tell you 300 people came last year? Or do I tell you 90% of the practitioners on our list came last year? Or do I tell you lots of people? Like, it's all social proof to different degrees, but it's really hard to code the differences between them. We talk about this all the time in the nudge coding team, the 3 coders and myself. And I think we get to it a little bit because the different frameworks actually define social proof differently, and so that helps get to capturing that variability. But I think that's a flaw actually in the current frameworks that we have academically around nudging. Like, a nudge is not a nudge is not a nudge. They're very different. And so I'm hoping to use like NLP or machine learning on the interventions themselves, but we haven't even got to that point where you could imagine, at least the linguistic ones, we currently pull out any important text as another column. And you could imagine running that through, I don't know, some NLP expert, I'm sure, is going to have a better model than me, running through some model for tone or length or something like that, and maybe that becomes another covariate in the model. But we're very far from that right now.
Thank you, Linnea. La curiosidad se nos tomó el auditorio. Tenemos una más.
I'm sorry, Linnea. Nice to meet you. I want to give you a big, massive thank you for this exposition. I really loved it. I have one question about the main question of the exposition, about which nudge works best. And I was feeling that the options that you gave us were more like external factors, right? I was wondering if there are internal factors, more specific, like psychological internal factors. For instance, emotions, feelings, previous childhood experiences that also influences us to make decisions in our future or even though in our present. And the second one was in the study that you made about which image would work best. I was wondering how much alliance or correlation is between behavioral science and neuroscience, more specific in neuromarketing.
What's the network marketing?
Neuromarketing.
Oh, neuromarketing?
Yeah.
Oh, ooh, okay. Well, on that one, I have no idea. So
Okay.
that second question's easy. I think we have a neuroscience expert here, and they can probably answer better than me. But I mean, I'm assuming there are some correlates. We use slightly different measures, but it's definitely outside of my bailiwick. But
Okay.
for the first question, you were talking about, I think that's a fascinating question, and one that Gonzalo and I have talked about quite a bit, since I know their team focuses a lot about individual differences and personalities and segmentation. Right now, our model, even if I showed you amazing results from that model, there's going to be a ceiling effect, right? If you think about the model getting better and better over time, it's going to stop here if this is perfection. Not just because every model is going to be imperfect, but we don't have individual level data. So if I had things about how people perform on the cognitive reflection test or the Big Five or whatever other individual difference you want, or their exact age, not just the average age, I'm sure that, I bet that model would get a little bit better. But the goal of this starting point was to take all of the evidence that already exists and try to combine it. If I insisted on only using papers that gave us the raw data, like we would have like 4 papers in the database, right? Because people don't publish it. And even then, the columns they include in their data sets are incommensurate. Maybe they both include gender, but they do different categories of gender. So how do I fit those together? So I think it's a great point that if we had individual level data, we would have a higher chance of having a better model. But with the current sources of evidence we have, I think we're just going to be stuck at this ceiling. Given how bad the model is today, I think I'm just going to keep working on raising that ceiling right now, but I would love to encourage all of you to start thinking about how can you pull together more individual level data to try to improve prediction.
Thank you, Linnea. Un aplauso. Qué manera de empezar la mañana.
Muchas gracias.
Bueno, y una de las preguntas que más nos hacemos en el Laboratorio de Hábitos y Ciencias del Comportamiento en Confama es cómo logramos pasar de la teoría que nos enseña la academia a la práctica para cerrar esa brecha, digamos que al momento de aplicar herramientas comportamentales.
Tremendo. A Daniel le he escuchado en algunas ocasiones una pregunta y es, ¿cuántos de ustedes creen que el día de hoy ya han participado